Hey everyone, Will Brink here, brinkzone.com. Today is going to be a very different video, and I hopefully you enjoy it. If you do, I will have some more of these. I'm hoping this video in particular gets some comments below that whether, yes, I like the direction you're going here, Will, and we'd like to hear more, or, don't care for it, don't want to see any more anyway. That would be helpful to me if you would. So I just want to say that it's an unbelievable modern world we live in when famous gangsters are now YouTube stars. And I don't know if any of you are aware of that. Again, I'm a little behind the curve on this, to be honest with you, because these guys have been online for a couple of years now, at least. First, they were getting interviewed by some channels, and then they got their own YouTube channels, and they've got big numbers. And I don't even know how I found it recently, but I started watching some videos by some of them, and it really brings back a lot of memories for me. And early on, I was not in the mob, so get that out of the way. I was never in the mob, but I grew up. Maybe my friends know this, but I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn. In the 70s and the 80s. And, again, if you don't understand New York in terms of the sort of what New York was like, what New York's like today, the peak of New York, of everything good and bad that we associate with New York City was the 70s and the 80s. That was the straight up peak as far as just the craziness, the crime, the fun, the all of it. It just came to a peak. And I, was in a sense lucky enough to grow up, during that time. And I grew up in Cobble Hill, Carroll Gardens area of Brooklyn, which was, Carroll Gardens especially, was a very well-known mob neighborhood at the time. And so I'm watching some of these videos, and I'll give you the names and all that. And I just would like to say I highly recommend checking out some of these channels. I got to say, the stories of some of these guys are really, they're for one thing, they're just very good storytellers. I mean, so as always, stories are stories, but does somebody have a knack for telling the story and all that? And I've got to say, at least two of the three that I'll mention are just outstanding storytellers. Now, and if you've ever wanted to learn, understand, the nature of the mob, and we're talking about old school mob, not new school mob, which is a very different animal according to them, again. But New York, New York has always been considered like a melting pot, a true melting pot. The U.S., of course, has always been called a melting pot nation, and it is. New York, however, defines, the melting pot. Remember that when immigrants came in back in the day, they all came in through New York, through Ellis Island. That was stop number one for immigrants coming in. Now it's different, of course. But again, back in so New York was truly the sort of hub of the melting pot. And again, when I grew up there, it was still a true melting pot of nationalities and stuff. And I feel, in a sense, honored to have experienced that. And again, unfortunately, New York has gone on to be more homogenized in a lot of ways, and to quote unquote gentrified. I'm going to put in the annoying air quotes, and a lot of the character has been destroyed, frankly, of New York City. It doesn't have the true diversity, melting pot sort of sense, culture that it did. And when I lived in Brooklyn, in Cobble Hill and Carroll Gardens and stuff, it was that neighborhood back then was a blue collar mostly working class neighborhood, Irish Italian working class neighborhood. But again, it was still a real melting pot of a neighborhood. A lot of the neighborhood was a lot of it was like a bedroom community to people that worked in Manhattan. and because it was South Brooklyn, because it was right on the Hudson River, closest you could get to Manhattan without being in Manhattan, more or less. So people that lived in there, a lot of bedroom community, a lot of professionals. Who would, of course, walk down to the subway station and commute in. So you had a lot of that. You had, again, like, your basic WASP white kid like me mixed in there too. But for the most part, those neighborhoods, especially Carroll Gardens, was, blue collar, working class, tough Irish Italian neighborhood. And at the farther you went, north, I believe, north through Cobble Hill, and then you got up into like into the Heights, as we call it. That was where that was a wealthy area. It was always a wealthy area. So the farther you went that way, it got nicer. The farther you went the other direction, I think south, I believe south. Carroll Gardens, and you got into Red Hook, it got nasty, got real bad. Those were very dangerous areas. Now, and again, when I hear people tell me, I still have cousins and stuff there in the neighborhood, and when I hear from people tell me that like Red Hook is nice and stuff, I just can't picture it. It's impossible for me to picture Red Hook actually being a nice area that people want to live, but apparently it is. Apparently it's very nice. I mean, Cobble Hill, Carroll Gardens were surrounded pretty much on all sides at that time by bad neighborhoods. Some of them were really bad. We're talking about Fort Greene, which again I guess is very nice now, and you're talking about Bed-Stuy and areas like. I mean, these were really bad areas, but apparently, again, I guess there are hot areas to be in now. So, getting back to sort of, so I've been watching some of these videos. One of them I've been watching with is a Michael Franzese. I hope I'm pronouncing that right because I don't want to make anybody of these guys mad at me. But I've been watching. He was a well-known person in the mob. I'm not going to give away his backstory. You got to go watch his videos and stuff if you want to know. If you don't, but he was like mentioned in Goodfellas. Briefly, he didn't have like a big role in Goodfellas as a character, obviously, but he was mentioned in that. And according to him, they just did that for name recognition. He wasn't part of that crew and all that. But anyway, so he talks about going to this the Diplomat Club in Carroll Gardens, and I was like, oh, like wow, that brings back memories. The Diplomat Club, I knew about it back then. It was right around the corner from me. Well, not around the corner, but it was like a few blocks away, and everybody knew about it. You didn't go near the place. I didn't, at least. I had no interest in getting near such a place. But also, I'm watching videos by Sammy the Bull of Gravano. I'm sure most of you have heard of him. Boy, that guy is one of the most compelling storytellers. When you start watching a video from him, it's hard to not finish it. But again, he mentions multiple times the club, on Carroll Street and so forth, and it's really like just wild for me. Another guy, I don't even know if he has a channel. I've seen him being interviewed a few times and stuff. I don't know if he has like his own channel. I didn't see it, but anyway, this guy named Anthony Salvatore Luciano Raimondi. And he talks about that his father had a place on Baltic Street in Brooklyn, and I lived on Baltic Street, and he gave the address, and I went and Google Google mapped it, and I lived right down the street. So that one I didn't know about. That again, that one was unknown to me. I only found out about that apparently there was something going on Baltic Street right down the street from me. But when he said that, again, just the memories for me just really came flooding back. I mean, again, it's really hard to explain what those neighborhoods were like back in that time. Now, Carroll Gardens and to a lesser degree Cobble Hill, but Carroll Gardens, I mean, these were relatively safe neighborhoods, even though they were surrounded by some really bad areas. I mean, there was the cutoff, and anybody that grew up there and anybody watching this will get a laugh out of this. But anyway, Smith Street was like the no cutoff. You didn't go past Smith Street. Smith Street was as far as you went unless you were expecting or looking for trouble, because after Smith Street it got bad, real bad. And again, I used to travel and we would travel in large groups of kids. There'd be like 10 of us or something walking when we went through there, which we did regularly. But you didn't go through there by yourself or whatever unless you were looking for serious trouble. But we would go through there, like say in a larger 6 of us, 10 of us, whatever group we would travel together when we were walking through there. Because we used to walk. A lot of times we take the train, but a lot of times we didn't want to take the train. We would walk all the way through some of the worst neighborhoods to get to where we wanted to go. Maybe it was Park Slope. Now, Park Slope, again, is a nice area. It was always nice, but again, it was, at that time, a nice area surrounded by shitholes, really bad areas. So Smith Street was like the cutoff. Again, now I understand Smith Street's very nice now, and even past Smith Street's nice and gentrified and all that. But Smith Street was like But my point being is that one of the reasons that those neighborhoods that we were in were fairly safe was because of the mob. I mean, you knew criminals. I think most criminals knew not to go make too much trouble. I mean, there was like normal stuff, car robberies or maybe occasional muggings. There wasn't a lot of muggings, but there was a few. But anyway, I think a good, well-known reason for serious crime for the most part, not being in those neighborhoods too much was the mob. There was a very well-known story in my neighborhood where a guy, and I'll tell this story some other time, but a guy got caught breaking into somebody's car. That this guy was an associate. He wasn't a mobster, quote unquote. He was a younger guy. He was associate something. Anyway, he beat the guy to death with a bat in broad daylight on a Brooklyn street, and there were no witnesses. I'm sure you know why there were no witnesses. But anyway, that got around, basically not that breaking into people's cars in that neighborhood was probably a really bad idea. So, again, we all knew about it. We all know who did it. At least I will say I was told who did it. I didn't see it. Anyway, I don't want to, statute of limitations and all that. I was not part of it. I didn't see it. So bringing around to one story maybe that will be sort of interesting, and I've got a handful of others that are pretty interesting, I think. Anyway, so there was a restaurant. Excuse me. Got to get some coffee, some Alpha Joe, of course, for the frog in my throat. Okay, so a lot of the restaurants, were fronts for the mob. I mean, pizza places. There was a well-known funeral home that's listed. You can look that one up. One of the families, the 5 families. Remember, that New York was, and I guess it still is, was run by 5 primary families from the mob. And there was a well-known funeral home that was owned by the mob. That there was a lot of the pizza places, that kind of thing. So there were a number of places that were fronts, and what a front more or less is a legit business that is the front, and then that is involved in illegitimate or illegal business normally, or it may be legit all the way through, but it's just like a hangout where it's sort of their central spot. The Diplomat Club apparently was a core hangout for a specific one of the families there, and again, guys like Michael Franzese and Sammy the Bull and stuff, would come and go from. I would assume that I probably walked right by these guys. Who knows? So there was a little restaurant, a little diner / restaurant right on the corner, right around the corner from me, from where I was, and I don't think this place was a front. I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, it wasn't like known as. Nobody ever said anything. I don't think it was. But regardless, it was run by these 2 Italian brothers, Nick and George, very nice guys, and they were very nice to me. And it had the cheapest breakfast. It was right down the street. It had the best and cheapest breakfast around that my mother would take me to, because I was really young at this time. And and there were always, again, a lot of this stuff comes back to me as I got older. I didn't notice any of that at the time, because it all seemed normal to me. And then I was like 10 or 12. Anyway, the place was always full of old Italian guys and other people. It was a neighborhood place. People, everybody was allowed in there. But it was always, always had like these old Italian guys sitting in there too. And we went in there originally with my mother's boyfriend, Tony Geritano. And the story about Tony, again, which was told to me loosely, because again, I was very young. No one was going to sit me down and say, here's what happened. But Tony was from Bensonhurst. Bensonhurst, very well-known, obviously Italian area, which was very well-known mob area. Tony apparently had a business. I think he was an architect. Something happened where he got into, a disagreement or a problem with somebody over there. And I guess he decided it was best for him and his health and whatever to leave Bensonhurst and move to our area, which is basically as far away as you could get from Bensonhurst, and still be in Brooklyn. So we went in there together a number of times, and they were sort of broken up, not friends. I went in there a number of times, like Saturday after morning with my mother. We'd have breakfast. So at some point, when I got a little older, maybe I'm like 12. Again, you have to understand the time and the place. Parenting, this was the time of, I guess, what they call free-range parenting or whatever. I mean, and when I say we, like my friends and whatever, we had very little parental oversight at that time, more or less. By the time you were old enough, I would be sent down to the corner store to get cigarettes and beer by my mother. I was like 9 or 10, and but they knew me. I'd go to the corner store. The place was called Daisy's, and that's a whole other story. But anyway, I'd come in and I'm like 9 or 10 years old, and they knew exactly what I was there for. They knew who it was there for, and I would give them the money, and they would give me the beer and the cigarettes, and I would, take it home to my mother, because they knew my mother. But just needless to say, when you hear some of these ages and you're like, who does, who sends their 10-year-old out or whatever? I was getting on the train and going to school by myself at, like I say, junior high. By junior high, I was, again, I'm like 10 or 11, whatever, commuting into Manhattan and stuff to go to school. So by the time I was, I guess, like I say, I want to say 11 or 12 years old, my mother would just give me some money and let me go down to this place to eat by myself. And it was cheap even for the time of the 70s. This place was cheap. I mean, it was like a breakfast and coffee for like $3 or something, $3 or $4. And so I liked to go there by myself, and I would go in there, and there would be the old Italian guys hanging out there. And I think they recognized me, but I'm just a kid, and I would talk to them. And what happened was that I was always really interested in history. I've always been a history nerd. I always like to learn history, though, by orally talking to people and learning. I'm a sponge that way. I never liked learning history through books, since I watched a lot of documentaries as a kid, too, like World at War and all those. So that was something that was always of interest in me. And so what ended up happening was I would show up and I would sit with these guys, and they would tell me stories about Brooklyn, old school Brooklyn, way back in the day Brooklyn. And they liked me because, here's a kid, here's a young kid who just sits and wants to hear from them all the old stories of Brooklyn. And they would tell me all about working down at the docks, the shipbuilding docks for World War II. Some of these guys had been in World War II. They would tell me about the trolley. There used to be a trolley that came up from the docks on Atlantic Avenue, which again, if you know that area, is a big area. And so I would just sit on and on their every word and listen to old school Brooklyn, and they would tell me some really interesting and amazing stuff. And like I say, they loved me. And then I became like kind of a regular there. And, here's, like I say, so here's this like 12-year-old little white kid hanging out with all these old Italian guys. And they were very nice to me. Like I say, they were always very, very nice to me. And again, in retrospect, at the time, of course, I didn't think anything about it. But now in retrospect, I realize. So I'm going to finish this story out because maybe this isn't that interesting to some people, but I'm going to finish off with one fun thing, and then I have, if you like it, please let me know. I will have some other stories. Anyway, I come in there one day, and one of the old Italian guys who had been in World War II, and remember, this isn't that long ago. I mean, it wasn't what it is today. We're still talking, 1970s, late 70s, I guess. Yeah, I would have been. No, no, actually, not even late 70s. Earlier, mid 70s, mid 70s, something in that bar. Yeah, mid 70s, something like that. Anyway, so he was not that old, but he was in World War II. And again, when it comes to World War II, I'm a history nerd, but when it comes to World War II, I could listen all day long to anybody who was in World War II, and that's one of the reasons I am a tour guide. I am a tour guide at the UDT Navy SEAL Museum in Fort Pierce, Florida. That's another story. But again, I like working there. I'm there once a week on Sundays, and because I love history, I love military history, I love World War II history, and it's just a very interesting place. Anyway, so this old Italian guy who was in World War II used to tell me all the stories, and this guy had really been in some stuff. He had really been in some stuff, and once he realized how interested I was, he really, a lot of those guys don't like to talk about that kind of thing, and don't open up too much. And here again, here's like a 12-year-old who is fascinated, but he did tell me a bunch of stuff. So he comes in one day with this box, and he sits down and he says, "Well, I've come to really enjoy our talk." You have to understand, again, when you're talking to these guys, especially these older Italian guys, everything is a build-up. Everything is this it takes a long time to get to the point. And I hope you're not saying, "Hey, well, get to the point." But I have to give you how this feels. You didn't just say, "Hey, hey Joey, hey Luigi," or whatever. What do you want? You didn't do that, especially when you're a younger guy like me. You had to listen and let the time go by as to what was he getting to. So he sat down. He said, "Hey, Will, I've really enjoyed our talks. I think you're a really good kid. I can see that you are really interested in these topics of which I went through. My own kids don't never ask me any questions. They don't give a damn. And I really appreciate that the time that we've had, to talk about this." And I said, "Thank you. I really appreciate that, and thank you for telling me all the things that you've been through." And I have to say, as a kid, I wasn't that respectful. I was kind of a wise guy as a kid. I got to be honest with you. And again, but when you talk to these guys, whatever reason, you just felt and knew that you had to be respectful with them, and it was just something about the thing they gave off, with them, I was the most polite, nicest, kid there. And I don't think I was not that way with a lot of people, but whatever reason with them, I was always very, yes, sir, no, sir, anyway. So I said, "Thank you very much." And I really appreciate you've told me these things. And I mean, one of the reasons I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but things are coming back to me. Another reason I was just very interested in World War II. So there's a lot of people in my family, were much older than me. My father was much older than me, because I was from his second marriage. My father was in World War II. My grandfather in World War II. My uncle was in World War II. My step-grandfather, the guy my grandmother married after my real grandfather died, yada. These guys were all in World War II. So this was really, part of my family and something that I was very interested in. Anyway, I said thank you to him. He pushes this box over and he says, "I want you to have these." And I opened the box up, and they were full of Nazi medals, all kinds of medals. And I said, "These are for me." He said, "Yeah, well, I want you to have these. I took those off dead Germans. I killed those guys. Those medals were taken off dead Germans that I killed. And I want you to have these medals because, they don't mean, I can't do anything with them. My kids don't give a damn about them. I think you'll really appreciate them." And I was, again, I was really taken aback by that. I was like, "Are you sure you want me to have these?" He said, "Yes. Yeah, Will, I want you to have those." And I said, "Thank you very much," and all that. And I went home, and I showed my mother, and she lost her mind. My mother was not happy, because she thought I was being indoctrinated into the neo-Nazi party or the KKK or something. My mother was a very liberal woman, very, and she was not happy at all with these box of Nazi medals. And it took me a while to explain to her, what was going on here. And I said, no, it's not what you think. I said, I go and I talk to people and I sit with those guys and, they're World War II veteran, or some of them World War II veterans. And he wanted me to have these medals as a friendship thing and as a historical thing. I'm not being indoctrinated into the neo-Nazis and, and all that. And she kind of, it took a while for her to kind of, calm down over that one. So it did work. She did finally, come down to realize that again, it was this, my motives had nothing to do with, being a Nazi of anything like that. It was much more patriotic thing than anything else, and how much I just respected this gentleman. So, that's one of my Brooklyn stories. And, like I said, Brooklyn in the 70s, New York City in the 70s, 80s was peak New York. By all standards, Brooklyn, it was another level, and I got some stories, believe me. So I hope you enjoy that. Please hit the likes and the subs if you like this discussion that goes outside my normal specialty of nutrition and supplements and health and all that, and some of my sidebars into audio and all that. But I have a lot of different interests. I am definitely just not a one topic person. So I'll see y'all on the Brink Zone.